Sony with their X Mark V seem to be following a trend that I'm seeing in multiple headphone manufacturers. This trend of moving away from premium materials such as leather and metal in favor of, well, a lot more plastic. But smart use of that plastic nonetheless. Cheaper materials are being compensated for with quality fitment and some design flourishes that frankly exude panache. Like the flared ends of the headband that slide and settle beautifully into their own groove when you're adjusting the ear cups, or the little colored accents in the microphone vents for that matter, all serve to give you, frankly, a quite premium feeling headphone despite their cheaper materials. Now, cheaper materials are all well and good for the manufacturer, but for us, it also means that it's lighter. Light enough that coming in just under 250 grams, the X Mark V just about manages to dodge what would otherwise be a cardinal sin for headphones: the dreaded narrow headband. This particular headband is incredibly thin and normally would be a pain in the, well, head, but it's so light that I barely notice it. This comfort is further augmented by the use of leatherette or some kind of leathery material with every part of the headphone that actually touches your head. The foam they use is thick and soft, and the ear cups are deep and wide, so no matter what the head or ear size and shape, this headphone ought to work. Now, unlike certain other headphones, even though the XM5 only falls flat in one direction, the ear cups actually do swivel in the opposite direction too, further aiding in that good fit. But the one thing that mars the experience is fingerprints. The moment you lay your grubby paws on it, the XM5 is a little bit too eager to expose my biometrics to anyone around, not to mention how oily my hands usually are. And did I mention, it comes in a snazzy little case with a nice little compartment for your cables, USB-C for charging, and 3.5mm aux cable for your wired audio listening should you desire it. From a features point of view, it supports LDAC, AAC, and SBC codecs and connects to up to 2 devices simultaneously. Unless of course you're using the aux cable, in which case it's just one device at a time. The X Mark V in true Sony fashion comes with a slew of features that Sony offers pretty much across all its Bluetooth offerings. The ability to use the internal gyros to see if you're walking or sitting or standing, and the ability to change your noise cancelling and ambient modes accordingly, or to do the same thing based on your geolocation. Personally, I've always just set them to change to ambient sound mode whenever I'm at the dog park, and that's the extent of how much I use it. But there are a whole bunch of other features that I personally like, and the biggest feature in my opinion is the control scheme. Because apart from the usual 2 buttons that most headphones come with, one for power and Bluetooth pairing and the other to switch noise cancelling modes, the X Mark V has the entirety of the right ear pad as a touch control surface. And it's really the implementation that is fantastic, because instead of just relegating all the controls to varying number of taps, most of it is just a swipe away. So play and pause is still 2 taps, but if you want next track or previous track, you just swipe forward or swipe back. If you want volume up and down, you swipe up and down. I cannot explain to you how incredibly intuitive this is and how much easier it is than a lot of the competition. As a side note, you can also pair your noise cancelling mode button with Spotify. Now, one of the things Sony is known for is its speak to chat, and while I am not a huge fan of this, that's mostly because I mumble to myself a lot, especially when I'm writing or reading a script for a YouTube video. Hang on, speaking of which, I've been asked to tell you to consider subscribing or becoming a YouTube member because A, giveaways, and what's that other thing? Oh yeah, bonus content. That's it. Is that it? Do you think I messed up the flow? Nah, I think we'll be fine. We'll be fine. But if you're not that, then speak to chat can be quite useful. It's a lot more refined than when they first came out with it a few years ago, and you get to choose the sensitivity level, which means you could theoretically mumble to yourself a little bit and get away with it. But if you don't like that, one of the coolest things about the XM5 is the fact that you can use your right hand to cover your right ear cup, and it automatically goes into an ambient sound mode so you can have a conversation with someone. This I find to be particularly good because speak to chat might not indicate to someone that I've actually engaged with their conversation because the headphones are still on, right? It's not the same as taking one ear off. That's a clear sign to the other person. But if you hold your hand up to the ear cup, at least they know that you're doing something in order to listen to them. So between the two, personally, I prefer using the gesture rather than speak to chat. The choice, of course, is yours. Now, all that's well and good, but if I'm being honest, my favorite feature of the X Mark V is its EQ. Which means we should probably talk about sound quality. Now, there are 4 things to talk about: active noise cancellation, ambient sound mode, actual sound quality, and the microphone quality. So let's start with A and C. It's a bit of a mixed bag. Sony's doing this thing, and you can see this on their XM5 earbuds as well as the XM5 headphone, and this is reflected in my measurement of noise cancelling performance, which you can find on this website. And if you go to artings.com, their measurements also show the same thing, that Sony has made a choice. So when it comes to noise cancelling, their X Mark V series seem to do a very good job, in fact the best job in the market, of cancelling out high frequency sounds, the higher pitched noises. So if you're sitting at a restaurant, then all the cutlery clanging and the higher pitched voices, they get cancelled out like there's no tomorrow. But when it comes to lower frequency sounds, the Sony is definitely behind the competition being Bose and Apple. And I don't know why this is, because now it's a bit of a mixed bag. Now, there are some situations where the Sony does a better job than Bose or Apple, but I find in a lot of situations, I prefer a lot of the low-end rumble to be removed more than the high-end stuff. Honestly, I'd rather everything be quashed completely, but life isn't perfect. But between the Sony and the Bose and the Apple, I think the Bose and the Apple do an overall better job, with Sony being better in certain specific cases. Make no mistake, this is still better noise cancellation than most of the other Bluetooth headphones out there. Just, it's a flagship headphone, so I need to compare it with flagship headphones. And the same thing goes for ambient sound mode. Now, to be fair, Sony has never really concentrated on the most natural transparency mode. Apple and Bose do, and they're very good at it. Apple's number 1, Bose is a very close second, and Sony is not. But where Sony does not have the natural ambient transparency mode, what it gives you is customization. You get a slider from 1 to 20, 1 being more noise cancelling and less ambient sound, 20 being an amplified ambient sound experience, and somewhere between 8 and 12 I find is a more natural ambient sound mode. Having said that, what you can also do is tie that in with your geolocation and have it switch automatically, or just change according to what mode of transport you're in. All those things are, well, frankly, features that you don't find in any other headphone. Whether they're valuable to you or not is a choice you have to make. But ambient sound mode does exist, it does do its job. It's not the most finessed thing, but it is the most customizable thing. Which brings us to perhaps the most important thing of all, actual sound quality. How does the XM5 actually sound? And once again, we have a bit of a mixed bag, because there are 2 things to look at when talking about sound quality. One is the tonal balance, which is the balance between the bass, mids, and the highs. And I'll be honest with you, balance is the key word, but there are multiple ways to do it. We'll get back to that in just a minute. The other side of it is technicalities, which again is very tied into the tonal balance, but is worth talking about separately. Things like soundstage, which is the spaciousness that you get when you're listening to music, or imaging, which is the ability to pinpoint where a certain sound in your music or movie is coming from. And on both of these accounts, Sony is fantastic and arguably one of the best amongst Bluetooth headphones, at least in this price category. However, I do think from a tonal balance point of view, Sony has somewhat missed the mark. See, what they've gone for is a lush, intimate, bassy sound, and that is what they've achieved. The problem is it comes at the cost of fidelity in the bass and comes at the cost of clarity in the mids. They're both compromised, and I don't think a company like Sony should settle for that. But thankfully, there is an EQ to save us in the app itself. And using that EQ, I tried to sort this out. Now, the first thing I did was I dropped the 400 Hz by a couple of notches and dropped the bass slider by a couple of notches. And I also reduced the 6.3 kHz by a notch, just a notch, to remove some of the sharpness that I perceived in the overall sound. And this did wonders. This gave me a much cleaner, much more relaxed sound that basically gave me clearer mids and immediately gave me more fidelity and detail in the bass. However, I also noticed that this compromised on some of that lush, intimate mid-range that I think Sony wants their headphone to have, and it would be a shame not to have it because it sounds beautiful. So I set out to do another EQ, both of which I will share on my Discord channel as well. You can go check that out. But this time around, I dropped the bass by a couple of notches still, but I increased the 400Hz slider by 1 notch. What this did was bring back some of that lush, intimate forward vocals. A lot of presence in deeper vocals and guitars was restored, and I think it sounds really, really nice. Bass is still a bit more subdued compared to the stock configuration, and this brings about bass fidelity. I can now hear more detail in the bass while still preserving the impact that is supposed to be there. And once again, 6.3K slider down by a notch just to remove some of that sharpness. Now, these are EQ settings and they're up to you. They're just a good starting point. Use them, play with them, find out what you prefer. Overall, I think the tonal balance wise, the Sony XM5 is a bit of a miss, especially considering they've released the 720N, which is their budget offering, which I have reviewed. I'll put that review up here. You should go check it out. It's in my opinion, one of the nicest tuned Bluetooth headphones on a budget. They could have just used the same tuning here. I don't know why they didn't. My EQ effectively kind of moves it in that direction, and with a little bit of EQ, this is probably one of the nicest Bluetooth headphones in terms of space, in terms of imaging, and in terms of outright detail. I really like it with a little bit of EQ. Now, one other thing that deserves mention is the battery life. They claim 30 hours with active noise cancellation on, but that is, I believe, without LDAC. With LDAC on as well, if you're using an Android phone, it tends to give somewhere between 24 and 26 hours, which is still quite decent. But what's really, really cool is the fast charging. 3 minutes of charge will give you roughly 2, maybe 2.5 hours of battery. This is probably the fastest charging that I've seen on a headphone, and it's a really good thing, and it's ticking all my boxes as far as battery life is concerned. Which brings us to the all-important question, is the XM5 worth it for you? Well, if you do choose to buy it, what you do get is something that looks and feels quite premium, quite snazzy in my opinion. It's definitely comfortable on the head, and from a features point of view, I don't think any headphone can beat it. It comes with a lot of features, some of which are probably more useful than others. It also has a touch control scheme, which I think is very intuitive. And just as a side note, I found this little gesture that's not mentioned in the manual anywhere. 2 fingers, tap and hold the right ear cup, and you can activate or deactivate speak to chat. Now, on the other hand, active noise cancellation isn't the best in the market, but it's up there. It's right up there with the best. It's not the best. Ambient sound mode, well, it really depends on what you want. I prefer a natural transparent ambient sound mode, and this doesn't give that, but it does the job. From a sound quality perspective, with a little EQ, this is easily one of the best Bluetooth headphones in this budget. And the battery life, well, you know how I love that quick charging. In my opinion, the key question is it worth the money? Because, and this is important, this is a flagship Bluetooth headphone that comes in just under $350. And the competition, the Bose Quiet Comfort Ultra, is above $430. And so is the AirPods Pro Max for that matter. Which means for significantly less money, you're getting a flagship headphone that has really good sound quality and pretty darn good noise cancelling as well. Would I outright recommend this to someone if I didn't know them? Well, I'd tell them that for the money, you're getting some of the best things you are in the market. And I'd probably help them set up the EQ as well, just to make sure they're getting the best out of it. Overall, I think the X Mark 5 has a little bit of improvement to go, and that makes me excited about the X Mark 6. If they fix these issues, this will be an unstoppable headphone. The question is, will they? The answer will be on this channel, so you should probably subscribe or become a YouTube member. That is super, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay happy, stay peaceful, stay colorful. Namaste.